Good morning. I hope everyone is having a blessed Sunday morning. I wanted to talk a little bit this morning about strategies that help with ongoing issues of depression or sadness. A lot of times, this sadness that people are experiencing is triggered by ongoing events in their lives that are external to them. Obviously, we can also be impacted by things that we are causing in our environment, but by and large, I am a firm believer that depression, its primary causal factors are external to the individual, and that the focus should not necessarily be on treating that individual, but rather looking at what are the environmental factors that are exacerbating the symptoms that are manifesting in the individual. And this is critical because when you look at placebo-controlled clinical research that looks into the efficacy of antidepressants, from what I have seen in several studies, the placebo groups do better. They have less recurrence, relapsing issues, things like that, than the ones that are put on an antidepressant medication. Can't really explain the cause of that. I think that that's obviously not a good sign if the prescribed medications are exacerbating a condition and making the individual more prone to relapse. But I will say that the mechanism of action, from what I understand, the way that it impacts the neurocognitive functioning in the brain is extremely problematic. It interferes with the ability, the brain's ability naturally to produce what it's supposed to through its own functioning. Anytime you introduce a chemical compound that's going to interfere with cognitive functioning, with neurological functioning, you're going to run into problems. So, I don't know. I think that medicine in a lot of ways has been very cavalier in its approach to mental health concerns, and there hasn't been a whole lot of discussion of holistic approaches that can help to address those issues without permanent damage to the individual at a cognitive level. And until we start embracing that that is probably the healthiest pathway forward and is the least likely to cause harm, then I think we're going to continue to have a problem. I don't think that there's necessarily a huge problem with a small amount of medication in situations where the person is just in acute distress. But something else that needs to be considered is that individual in acute distress because of environmental factors, because of the actions of others. These things always need to be considered. Because if we see someone that seems to be symptomatic, that seems to be suffering from psychosis, and we can't delve deeper to talk to that individual to find out what the environmental factors are that are surrounding that individual, we're often going to be misled and think that the individual that is showing the symptoms needs to be fixed. And that's not an accurate statement, because you can numb somebody out on psychotropic medications or antidepressants, and that's not going to address their environmental factors. And in fact, they will more than likely experience the state that feels a bit like being zombified. They will really have no emotional expression whatsoever. It kind of like flatlines them as an emotional being. And I obviously don't think that that's very healthy either. And if you do any research into the impacts that these medications have on the pineal gland, it's very concerning. And the pineal gland is critical to proper brain function throughout life and into later adulthood, and then when someone becomes elderly. Improper functioning of that can contribute to Alzheimer's, it can contribute to dementia. So until we actually acknowledge that these perceived short-term fixes are not fixes, in fact, they often exacerbate the condition and cause a slew of health complications down the road. Until we can actually acknowledge that, we're going to continue to see people relying on a pill to solve their problems when it's actually creating more. I hope that this message has been helpful. God bless.